You're listening to Spotlight, the podcast that fosters connections with veterans and military spouses. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is Bob Louthan, the host of the Spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. Pleased to have Thomas Brennan as our guest today. The War Horse is an award-winning nonprofit newsroom educating the public on the military service war and its impact. It uses journalism, public forums, and writing seminars to ensure that those most affected by war have a voice in the national conversation. And Thomas Brennan's the executive director and founder of the War Horse. And prior to studying journalism at Columbia University, he was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, an infantryman with tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's got bylines in Vanity Fair and the New York Times. Thomas, thank you for stepping into the spotlight. I'm really pleased to have you as a guest on the program today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So you're a United States Marine, and I just want to jump right into this. There's a story that you've got about yourself and your experience, and if I could, I tell you, it's an inspirational story, but it sort of starts on what you describe as the worst day of your life, and I'm wondering if we could start there this morning.
Sure. Yeah. No problem. Really how my Marine Corps career came to an end and my journalism career began was on November 1st, 2010. I was on a foot patrol in Helmand Province, Afghanistan, leading a squad of Marines, and we had a photographer who was there with us that day. Myself and 3 of my Marines got wounded that day, all suffered traumatic brain injuries from rocket-propelled grenades. It was a pretty intense firefight. I because of the blast, I don't really remember too much. But after the medevac and we all got taken out, fast forward a year, and the photographs that journalist took for me that day, or took of us that day and of my Marines, were really crucial to my recovery as I started going down the road of mental health care and cognitive therapies for the brain injury type stuff. So yeah, that's where my story really began. Was in Helmand, getting blown up.
Did you always want to be a Marine? How did you get into the Marine Corps to begin with?
I initially thought that I was going to join the Navy because my grandfather was a World War II sailor. I grew up hearing stories about the Navy, being on ship, things like that. But as I started getting older, he kept telling me stories about how the Marine Corps always told him no because he was too skinny and could never carry a machine gun and all that. And that kind of planted the seed. I'm like, Grandpa couldn't do it, but maybe I can. And I walked in and I listened to each branch. I heard about the Army, 14-month deployments. I said no, thank you. Finally saw the Navy uniform in person. Didn't think I'd look too good in it. Air Force just was never on my mind. And then the Marine Corps recruiter told me that I couldn't do it. They
threw down the gauntlet, huh, so to speak.
Told me I wasn't cut out for it, which, I think if you've got it in you to potentially become a Marine, like I think that really speaks to that part of your personality, like the "I'll show you" type mentality.
Do you go to Paris Island or are you Hollywood? What side of the country?
I got beat up by sand police at Paris Island. Yeah.
I can't imagine that place. I tell you, I hear all the stories, but did you go during the summer or during the winter?
I went in August, and then I made the mistake later in my career going down there to be a marksmanship instructor, and 3 years of getting eaten by those things.
Oh my goodness! I tell you, I love the Grand Strand part of the country, but your experience down there is a little bit different, I guess. Maybe you don't want to go to the beaches of the Carolinas ever again. So, anyway, well, when did you discover that you were a journalist? To go back to the story, but when did that aha moment happen?
I think it was to become a journalist. So I was interested in writing always, but always journaled, loved writing home. I always enjoyed writing, but it wasn't until Well, let me take a step back. When I enrolled in therapy, I was having trouble. I had aphasia, and I was having trouble getting the words to come from my brain off my tongue the way that I wanted to. So my therapist handed me a notebook, and that's really where I started writing. And that notebook turned into a thank you letter to the journalist that took the photographs of me the day that we were wounded. And I didn't know anybody who wrote for a living. I am notoriously horrible at grammar. I still suck at commas. Um, so
Right.
I sent it to the only person in writing that I knew, who was his editor at the New York Times that he had written to or written for. And I was just like, can you please check the commas on this thing so I don't look like an idiot in front of a professional writer? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and the immediate response, well, not immediate, but maybe a few hours later, I got a response back from him asking me if they could publish the story. Um, and seeing your byline, in a prestigious paper like that, is enough to inspire anybody to maybe want to do more.
What was
But
the timeline? What year was this that took place?
that was 2011. It was almost a year after I got hurt.
Okay.
Yeah, it was about a year after I got hurt. And it was while I was, just beginning the medical retirement process. And I was in the medical retirement process, and just the reaction that I got from civilians and veterans and active duty alike, and military families who connected with that story. It really, I don't know, like I'm not the original person to say this, but like Marines defend the the United States. And I think that coming out of uniform, I was looking for some kind of call to service again. And journalism, to me, not only allows me to look out for the people in uniform that I would still be serving alongside if I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't gotten hurt. Like, I wouldn't be retiring for another 3 years. I was going to stay in.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives me a way to not only look out for the people that are still in uniform, but it's a way to, it's a way to defend America in a sense. I mean,
I think all veterans are looking for their next mission, so to speak. But in your case, did you sort of found it by accident? So
yeah.
it's really fortuitous. So tell me, how did the Warhorse come down? I mean, when did that? What's the genesis of that idea?
Yeah.
But take me from that 2011 story maybe into 2015, when the Warhorse comes into play.
So 2011, I'm in the medical retirement process. I've written for the first time. I'm starting to, think if that's where I want to go. 2012 is when I was in the process of getting retired. Actually,
When did you start at Columbia, by the way?
well, that was in 2012 when I got retired. I transitioned immediately to being a military reporter outside of the base that I'd served at.
Oh,
Outside of Camp Lejeune. So I was writing about the local Jacksonville, North Carolina veteran community for almost a year and a half. And during that time, I was getting local news and media, and especially for-profit media, is struggling. And I got to experience that, like, boots on the ground perspective in a small local newspaper environment. And it was frustrating to me having to write the 2-paragraph casualty announcement about people that I could have been serving with alongside 3 months earlier, or 6 months earlier, sorry. And going around and chasing after World War II veterans to get their story was a privilege, and I'm honored to have spoken with the dozens of them that I was able to. But it made me wonder, like, how journalism can do a better job of capturing the stories of veterans and military families before we're on our deathbed. Like, my generation's perfectly capable of, we still have our faculties. We can still, remember what we went through, most
right.
of us. So it planted, talking with those World War II veterans, it helped me realize that you can overcome trauma and live a productive life, regardless of what you've been through. It's hard to, sit across from somebody who fought on Normandy with a damn pocket knife, and think, oh, poor me.
Right.
So like they helped me heal, but the World War II veterans were absolutely the ones who planted the seed, for the idea of the warhorse. And that was later reinforced by, Korea veterans and Korean War veterans and Vietnam, especially Vietnam veterans. And the reason why I think that the Vietnam veterans were crucial to me being willing to take the plunge on starting a nonprofit newsroom was because Vietnam veterans showed our generation that it was okay to open your mouth and say that things can be done better.
Right.
Not that things are, it's not so the Vietnam veterans gave me the strength to say like, okay, like we actually can have this voice. We actually can speak out. So like the idea for Warhorse came from, me starting to understand the struggles that previous generations of veterans had gone through the lens of journalism, and wanting to do better, moving forward.
Yeah, my father was a World War II veteran in Europe and did not speak with us about his experiences until after Saving Private Ryan sort of came out, and then we had he shared how that movie in many ways captured some of the experience that he had seen, and that's when he really opened up well into his 80s, I think, and shared a lot of his experience after that. Before we get into sort of some current events and so forth, I have this feeling that there's this vacuum of journalism right now. There's a lack of investigative reporting in the mainstream media that um, that that the journalism has been replaced by the sensationalism of the 24-hour news cycle. And I think some of the newspapers have had to evolve from the print landing on your front porch to the digital medium as well. And then the second thing that I think is lacking, which is something that I think you are bringing to journalism, is the moral courage, to kind of do the things, to say the things, and particularly, in the military, to have the moral courage to sort of stand up for the things that are right when the chain of command might not want that to happen. So, two paths I want to go down, but let's first talk about just, am I right on my analysis of the mainstream media? Is investigative journalism going to see a resurgence in the mainstream media, or is it so politicized or so sensationalized that maybe that element needs a shot in the arm?
I'm not out of touch, in the sense that I know that media is flawed, but with I think a lot of that comes from the financial struggles that newsrooms have been placed under from the decline in ad revenue. I mean, the pandemic has ravaged newsrooms, and local and national community or local and national coverage. I don't know what the solution is to for-profit media. My specialty is nonprofit media, and I
Hmm.
like to really focus on how much of a positive impact nonprofit newsrooms are making. When I first launched the Warhorse in 2015, I think there were only like 110 nonprofit newsrooms that were all around the country. Now I think the Institute for Nonprofit News has 250, 300. It's like so it's I'm confident saying I think it's at least doubled. So like moving forward, like I think it's better to focus on the solutions that are emerging in reporting. Like single subject newsrooms like the Warhorse are they exist elsewhere. Like there's one called Chalkbeat that focuses on education. There's one called
Hmm.
the Marshall Project, which focuses on criminal justice. So nonprofit media is trying to rebuild the sustainability and ecosystem of traditional media, but in a way that still delivers on the the trust that was paramount. And
And that's a big thing that I want to
lost.
get on. I think the population has lost a lot of faith in what they're reading.
I have lost trust in some of, I've lost trust too. I think that it news can do better. I think that nonprofit news is, putting, that they're taking that first step in rebuilding that trust. And I mean, donor disclosure policies. I mean, we disclose everybody who gives us money is on our website, and it's transparent. How we spend our money is transparent. Like who's involved with our team, the partners that we use. Like all of that can't be said for every for-profit newsroom. So I think, well, not that I think, I know I'm going to continue putting my investment into nonprofit media and really trying to make that ecosystem thrive, because I think that when we look back, nonprofit media is going to be crucial in reestablishing some of the trust that's been lost.
We got to bring people back to trusting the media, because right now there's so much of their news comes through social media, which is probably even less reliable.
Oh, the misinformation that exists right now is absolutely it's horrible, and it's rampant, and something needs to be done about it. I don't know what it is. Not a sociologist. Just trying to do my little part with running a newsroom that people can trust.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that people sort of fall into these echo chambers, and then they only hear one side of the story. So let's move on to some current events. There's a current story that's going on right now that's gaining a lot of traction. It's called Gag Order: How Marine Corps Culture Silenced a Victim of Sexual Assault. Can you share with us, a little bit about the background on that story, and let's talk about that one right now.
Sure. So I first became aware of Tay's story when, who's the Marine involved in the court case. First became aware of her when I saw that the Virginian pilot wrote about her case, and how that her family was alleging that she was mentally ill and that she'd experienced sexual assault in the military, and that they'd failed to help her. Why I initially chose to dig in, though, was because the Marine Corps had gone on the record with the Virginian pilot saying that they were considering a gag order against the family, which would limit the attorneys and the Marines and any witnesses from talking with the press. As somebody who works, in the Fourth Estate, I find that incredibly problematic, and I think that it sets a horrible precedent. And given all the headlines about sexual assault and sexual harassment in the military right now, like, these conversations are the ones that we should be having. And in her case in particular, I find it incredibly troubling because she was approved for medical retirement months ago. A board of Navy physicians unanimously approved her. They described her mental illness as severe. And the way that I see it now that the story is broken is that the Marine Corps has made a deliberate choice to leave a mentally ill Marine who could be in a mental health facility right now. They've left her in the brig, where she's continuing to mentally decompensate. And like, that's not how.
So they've imprisoned someone who's dealing with mental health. Is she being denied mental health care, or is it just, I guess imprisoning somebody who has mental health issues? And I'm close to this issue personally, family member with, a severe diagnosis, and it's a lifelong struggle. But literally the worst thing you can do is punish someone for being sick.
Well, I think what's hard for me to understand is the alleged victim of the attempted murder is her ex-boyfriend, who's an active duty Marine. That active duty Marine has been fighting for her release for months. And the reason he's fighting for that release, and has been doing so since the day of the attack, is because he wants her to get mental health care. Like,
he understands the source of whatever happened, right?
Like her sister's an active duty sailor, fighting for her to get moved to a mental health facility. her, like the Marines around her are fighting for her to get moved to a mental health facility. Her ex-boyfriend, who's still on active duty, like is trying to get her put into a mental health facility. It's not like the Marine Corps hasn't proven that they can move her from the brig to a mental health facility, because when she was deteriorating when she first arrived, they sent her to an inpatient facility for 7 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So like they've proven that they can take this step, which to me reinforces that this is a deliberate choice for them to leave her in there. Like it to me, it's, you know, the lawyer can take care of, the lawyer can look into, you know, whether or not the case needs to be thrown out. But to me, it boils down to, like, we take care of our own. Like, she's in uniform. She's been asking for help for years, and Marines have turned their back on her. So I'm confident the Marine Corps read my story. Blows my mind how they can read it and think to themselves that this is the right course of action for a sick Marine that is crying for reinforcements. Like, I've witnessed how far Marines will go to save someone when they're wounded on the battlefield. We don't show that same determination and same, like, self-sacrifice to help people who are struggling with mental illness off the battlefield.
I know you love the Marine Corps. I know you love the camaraderie and so forth. How does it feel to have to be, whistleblowing is not the right terminology here, but bringing to light this issue?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, the Marine Corps gave me everything that, I mean, I credit everything that I'm doing in my life and that I've accomplished in my life to what the Marine Corps taught me. I don't hate the Marine Corps. You know, this isn't anything against the military for retiring me or not. Like, I had a great 9 years, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the last year getting out, like, it definitely, I wasn't treated the way that I think that, you know, people who ask for help should be treated. But it doesn't mean I hold a grudge. Like, honestly, this is, like, I think that Marine leaders can do better. I think that, you know, in regards to this case in particular, like, they can do better. Like, they can be proactive, they can live out our core values, and they can care for an injured Marine. Because every step of the way they haven't.
You know, the military prides itself in sort of being reflective. Every mission that we ever did, we tore it apart, even if it seemed to have gone perfectly. There was always this sense of, you know, we can do this better.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start
They don't
talking
like
about
being told that. They don't like being told to do that. Like, they like being able to develop the strategy themselves.
Okay. So is this case complicated by the fact that the individual is a woman in an institution that has long held, you know, sort of the testosterone based, you know, side of it? That's part of it. Is second, you know, I think there's a stigma that is attached to mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and personally, as a family member, you know, who has seen what it does, it's awful. We need to be having a national dialogue, not just within the Marine Corps, but nationally, about, you know, mental health and destigmatizing, you know, that issue. Have those two things intersected in the Marine Corps, or is there something else going on in from your vantage point that's contributing to this?
So a few of the things is, well, with this case in particular, I think that states have done a good job of implementing, like, veterans courts that take, you know, mental illness and mental health and, you know, traumatic experiences in uniform into consideration when they're considering cases. The UCMJ, as you know, is much more cut and dry. There's no veterans court for taking mental health into consideration in these court cases. When in Tay's case in particular, like, I think it should be. She never should have joined the Marine Corps. Like, never should have been allowed to join the Marine Corps.
There was evidence in her case that she shouldn't have been enlisted in the beginning.
like the waivers, that the mental health waiver that she got from the Marine Corps never should have been on the table. Never.
And that's
Like,
surprising to me because, you know, the statistics are that something like 70% of uh, eligible age individuals in the United States wouldn't be qualified to join the military right now. So would she have fallen into that 70%? I mean, how did she slip through the cracks
I
specifically?
mean, physically, I mean, she was physically fit. She's, well, she still is, intelligent woman. I mean, driven, just passionate go-getter. So like I can see why a recruiter would have been interested in that. There are elements of her childhood psychiatric history and her childhood. I'm trying to make sure I'm as respectful as possible about this. There are elements of her psychiatric history as well as her, you know, childhood history of
Hmm.
trauma that were very apparent in documents that, if the recruiter had done their due diligence, would have been immediately disqualifying.
Right.
So, you know, but is somebody that I spoke with during the story gave the quote of, like, the Marine Corps brokers, like they broke her, so now they need to buy her. Like,
Right.
they brought her on board. I mean, she thrived at Paris Island from what I've understood. But immediately when she checked in, there was a social worker that reviewed her, or that she asked for help, and the social worker referred to her as an accident waiting to happen and referred her to the chain of command. Now, her chain of command, I think, did what good Marine leadership does. Like, they try to help the Marine, you know, and move them forward and develop them as an individual. But I think that, you know, the sergeant major sounds like an incredible Marine. Like, but the problem for me isn't with him. The problem with me is with the social worker. Like, the social worker is the professional, the mental health expert that recognized that she was an issue, yet she was still allowed to stay in. And
It,
then, yeah, but
Thomas, you know, at one point in my limited Army experience, I was a training officer and brought recruits through basic training. And my observation is that that basic training exposed a lot of that stuff. The difficulty of that period of time would expose the character, or in the case of mental illness, the mental illness, because I saw mental illness cases as, you know, coming through basic, and it seemed to expose that. So they just missed the ball on that completely, and brought her on into the Marine Corps.
yeah, yeah, I mean, so I
So
have
they had two
no,
chances to get this right in the beginning.
yeah, so they had the recruiter in the beginning that missed things, and then they had the social worker who, at her first duty station, called her, you know, quote, you know, an accident waiting to happen. And then later on in her career, she continued to go seek mental health care. You know, not faulting her for that at all, but in that process, she went to other Marines in her command who she asked for help, and there was one sergeant she was, you know, according to her journals, I think it was either her journal or one of the documents that she wrote. I can't remember. She was talking about how she asked a sergeant for help and to stand up for her, and he said that he would, but if, you know, she gave him sexual favors, and that when she said no, he treated her like shit. So, like, it wasn't just the recruiter, it wasn't just the social worker, it wasn't just the sergeant that, you know, asked her for sexual favors to do the right thing. Like, it went on and on and on and on, where, like, you know, taken to a naval hospital for a psychiatric break and released later that night, on her own accord.
Mm.
Um, Taken to a civilian hospital, same thing, released. Like, it was just a blatant a blatant disregard for, like, you couldn't look at what was going on with her and not see that she was spiraling out of control.
Right.
And instead of helping her, the Marines around her just let her fall apart. And now
The Marine
that's my
Corps is
brick.
probably a little bit of a reflection of society. I mean, there are people that take advantage of mental health people in this
Mhm.
country. I'm surprised by one element, which is that, you know, um, Generally, in my experience, the military has been a little bit out in front of society on social change, embracing some things. You know, we more or less have a good history in the military of being out in front of some of this stuff, but it sounds like in this case we're not.
No, I've spoken with too many women veterans and active duty women to like, the military is, I think, behind the times. There are people close to me that, have been, oh, I got to maintain some privacy.
Yeah.
We're behind I think that the military is behind the times on it.
That's a shame because in historically, I think we should be out in front of certain things. We shouldn't be a laboratory for social experimentation, if you will. But I do think that the military leads instead of follows on a lot of these issues, and it's disappointing. Let me take a step back. You've assembled an incredible staff, and we don't have time to talk about all of them, but I thought we'd pick one out. And your managing editor, Kelly Kennedy, has an interesting story. Maybe you could just share a little bit about her and her background and her experience, but just to sort of give our listeners an idea of the folks you've been able to bring to the Warhorse.
Sure. So Kelly is the most recent full-time employee to join the team. She's our managing editor. We go way back. I first met her, let's see, when I did my first writing seminar. I think it was 2013 when I was getting out. She was initially one of the mentors that showed up to help other veterans, because she's a veteran herself. She served Desert Storm, and since Desert Storm, she's reported here, there, and everywhere. Gone graduate degree in journalism, and just incredible work. Has written books about incredible stories of military service. She's patient, and just, I mean, she's a badass, in and out of the newsroom. And, I think that anyone
She not only was a deployed as a soldier, but she's also been embedded as a journalist. Is that right? So she's been on both sides of the story, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I always butcher it when I say this. I think she's the first woman veteran to cover the war in Iraq and Afghanistan as an embedded reporter as well. I'm butchering that.
No, I think that's a very unique part of her background, and brings a lot to your staff.
She's arguably one of the most respected military reporters in the space. And I know that, Samantha Daniels, who's our director of operations, she's a Marine spouse. But we're not just veterans and military family members. Like Danny Langhorn, who leads our social media and engagement. He's a civilian. Like, we think that veterans, civilians, military family members coming together to help accomplish our mission is really how we're going to be most successful. Is because if it's just veterans and military families doing this, then that creates an echo chamber that already exists somewhere else. If it's just civilians writing about it, then we're recreating a lot of what's going on in other newsrooms. But by bringing veterans like Kelly and myself, with military spouses like Sam, and civilians like Danny and Ben and Lydia, I think it just really fosters the type of conversation that we're hoping that the broader public will have about military service. Because ultimately, like, as we've wondered, like, how do we get disconnected people, or people disconnected from the military, to care about what we're doing? I think it's through compassionate, honest storytelling. And Kelly has a hell of a track record for that.
Yeah. Thomas, where do you see things going for the Warhorse the next couple of years? What's sort of the what's the op order? What's the objective here?
So I've obviously got my pie in the sky, like, big vision, for down the road. What stopped us from taking a more ambitious growth plan, or executing a more ambitious growth strategy is just money. I mean, we started off I started this off a Kickstarter campaign, raised $50,000. We've raised over $1 million since over the last 4 years, but most nonprofit newsrooms have multi-million-dollar budgets. We're I'm grateful for every amount that we've gotten at every level from every donor, but our newsroom has yet to find our champion, big philanthropic investor. Once that happens, we'll secure, we'll lock down a few years runway, and we hope to launch what we're calling as our military spouse reporting network, which is going to be like reporting chapters across the country at different military bases, where we take military spouses who are already in journalism or have a degree in journalism but are located in a news desert, which is where most military bases are. So then they'll be able to report on communities they care about and issues that hit, those issues are what are discussed around the dining room table, the dinner table at night. So they hit close to home. So it's going to help us employ and empower military communities through journalism. That's ultimately what we hope to do.
I want to encourage all of our readers, go to thewarhorse.org, give a good read to the stuff that's there, but look on the contribute button and consider contributing to the Warhorse. It's very easy to do, and it feels good to do it. Just a little plug there for you. But Thomas, you have an incredible story. It is amazing to me how quickly time flows by, but we're kind of running up against our deadline here. Is there another story you're working on right now that perhaps we should tease the audience with, or I guess the current story is probably generating a lot of follow-up. Will there be follow-up on that?
I'm going to be working on follow-up on that. There's been since the story broke about Tay, there's been a few legislators that I know have reached out to the Marine Corps and the family. A few different newsrooms have reached out about potentially, doing follow-up pieces on her treatment. For me, I'm focused on looking at the people and the system around her that failed. Still poking around there. But as far as my future projects go, they tend to stem around trauma. And sorry, let me take a step back. The 19th of January is when her next hearing is. And that's when the military is going to decide whether or not they're going to issue a gag order or, allow people to talk to the press. So I'm going to be attending that. I'll write a piece about that. But as far as the other stories that I'm working on, they really stem around mental illness and sexual assault as well. Because when you publish, stories about, you get a good amount of, like, we published a story from Tay and we've gotten a lot of tips since then. And there's been a few longer term projects on the same topic that I've been working on for a while that are, finally coming to the finish line. One involves, the FBI and mentally ill veterans that are connected to terrorism cases. Another one looks at contentious suicides that have taken place in the armed forces. And then another one looks at how the members of the highest echelon of the Army ignored reports of rampant sexual assault at elite units in the military.
Yeah. Well, it's been fantastic having you as a guest, Thomas. I want to reserve the opportunity to invite you back and maybe do a follow-up after some of the things we've talked about this morning play out. I would encourage all of our guests to visit the warhorse.org is the website. Are there other social media platforms that folks can follow the Warhorse?
We're pretty much on all social platforms at the Warhorse News.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much for stepping into the spotlight. I really do appreciate it. You've been listening to the Spotlight on the Veteran Crowd Network. Our guest has been Thomas Brennan, the executive director of the Warhorse. Thomas, again, thank you so much for being our guest. Bravo Zulu to you. I'll throw out a Semper Fi, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Spotlight by Veteran Crowd. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and uploads, please visit our website at veterancrowdnetwork.com. We'll see you next time.